Welcome today to Cash at College, Spending, Saving, and Student Loans. This is the first webinar of the Get Savvy, Grow Your Green Stuff series for 2023-2024 academic year. So we will just move right along. We are also recording this, so feel free to hop off early if you need to. We'll make the recording available to anyone later that might need it. So make sure that you have registered so you can get a copy of the recording and all the information that we'll be sharing in the chat. Suhas will be sharing links in the chat. Suhas, if you can share the slides again for anyone that joined us in the last couple minutes, that would be really helpful. My name is Andrea Pellegrini, and I run the University of Illinois Systems Student Money Management Center, and I'm joined today by my colleagues Emily and Nikki. Emily, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Emily Harmon. I am a finances educator for University of Illinois Extension. I am based in Champaign County, but I serve Champaign, Ford, Iroquois, and Vermilion counties.
Thank you, Emily. Nikki, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Nikki Jankola Shanks. I am the policy director for the Division of Banking at the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation.
Thank you, Nikki. And we also have Abby, Suhas, and Steve monitoring the chat. If you do have any questions, go ahead and ask those in the chat, and we'll also be monitoring that Q&A function that I talked about earlier. So collectively, the Get Savvy team represents organizations across the state of Illinois, which rest on the land of multiple Native nations, including ancestral lands of the Peoria, Kaskaskia, Piankashaw, Wea, Miami, Mascoutin, Ottawa, Sauk, Meskwaki, Kickapoo, Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Chickasha nations. And we have a responsibility to acknowledge these Native nations and to work with them as we move forward as a vibrant and inclusive society. So we're going to do a little bit of chat practice. I mentioned earlier, chat's pretty important. Again, you want to open up the chat either by hovering over the top or bottom of your screen where that black bar is. And let us know in what state and or county you're logging in from today. We like to know where people are joining us. A lot of people from Champaign County, Kane County, Will County. All right. Fabulous. Keep it coming. Sometimes we also have people from out of state, which we really appreciate everyone across the nation joining us. All right, so we're also going to launch a poll since we're going to have some poll questions today. This is some demographic information to tell us a little about who is joining us. Nobody else can see how you are responding, but we can kind of see the distribution of who is joining us today. So if you can respond, that will help us kind of guide our conversations and the examples that we present throughout today's webinar. So that's super helpful. Thank you. So we have about 30% of people that have responded so far. So we'll keep it up a little bit longer. This also helps some of our extension colleagues to maintain funding for providing information about the demographics of the people that they serve. So if you want to help Emily out, answering these questions are very helpful for her to maintain funding. All right, so it looks like we have a pretty wide distribution of ages, which is great. We have both students and full-time employees joining us. We have a lot of female participants, and we have a diverse group for ethnicity and race. So thank you so much. You can see the results real quick. In the interest of time, we'll just go ahead and keep things rolling. So we are going to be talking about a few different topics. Basically, the Cash at College webinar is designed to scratch the surface of several different financial concepts. So we're going to explore financial planning for college. We're going to talk about some different considerations for choosing a financial institution like a bank or a credit union. We're going to discuss a few credit myths and facts, as well as highlight ways to keep your information safe. And we're going to be talking a little bit about financial stress. There's a lot of stressors in academic environments in general, and finances are just another thing to add to the mix. And since we are focusing on finance, we're going to be talking a little bit about managing financial stress. And I'm going to hand it over to Emily to talk about creating a financial plan.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. So I'm going to start us out and we're going to talk about some things to consider when you are creating that financial or spending plan. You want to go to the next slide? Thank you. So on the screen, we see what we call a spending plan puzzle. So when you think about creating your spending plan, there's a lot of things to consider and a lot of variables that come up. And the best plan to accomplish your goals with the resources that you have available. So you want to make sure that when you're creating a spending plan, you want to balance what your goals are and what resources that you have available. And it's also when you're thinking about a spending plan, it's also flexible. So you can change a piece out whenever you need to or have the opportunity to. So balancing that. Everything is unique to the individual. So some things to consider when you're thinking about that spending plan or that financial plan is to identify your priorities. And this is on the screen. You can also follow along about the things that we may want to think about. So back to that, identifying your priorities. So think about what you value and what's important to you. Like as a person, what do you value? What's important to you? So this can also relate to your needs and your wants. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. And then another thing to consider is understanding those resources that are available to you. I just said that a little bit ago, but this could be exploring things like if you're having trouble making housing payments or if you're having trouble making ends meet, that could be looking for things like food or housing assistance to help with your spending plan to help make those ends meet. And then setting those SMART goals to help achieve your goals. So throughout the lifespan of Get Savvy, we've talked about SMART goals. And I will go a little bit more in depth in that if people do not know what that is. But that we will talk about that here in a little bit. And then making sure to track your progress. So helping keep yourself accountable. So make it a habit to evaluate your spending plan on a monthly basis or whatever that time frame may be. It could be monthly, weekly, biweekly, whatever that time period is for you. When looking at your spending plan, just look to see if you're on target with your spending categories, making sure that you're reaching your goals and that you're on track to achieve those goals. And then maybe you find that you need to adjust, and that's fine. And then lastly, like I said, to readjust your goals if you need to. So if you're finding that you may not be able to reach your goals because life happens, you can always analyze and readdress your priorities to do so. So we talked about those needs and our wants. So let's go into that. Our needs and our wants may play into our personal spending plans. But how do we even know what we may need and what we just want? So Andrea just launched a poll and I want to ask you guys a question. Is pizza a need or a want? So on the screen, you should see the options. Is it a need? Is it a want? It depends, or you're not sure. So I see right now, a want has took the lead, but we're kind of on needs and wants are kind of almost the same here. So I'll give it a couple more seconds. Okay, Andrea, can you share those results with everybody? Okay, so you should see the results on the screen. So we've decided that pizza is a need. So let's go to the next slide and let's talk about the answer.
Well, technically, it looks like the responses were want or it depends.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Nobody said need.
No, but gosh darn it. Nobody said need. It's want or it depends. Sorry about that. So let's go to the next slide to see the answer. So we're saying it depends, right? Because I was just saying everything is unique. Every person is unique. Every situation is different. So let's go ahead and let's take a step back and let's think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maybe some of you have heard of that. If not, it's fine. Maslow's hierarchy of needs essentially just says that we need food, water, and shelter to survive. We need our basic needs to keep us safe, food, water, shelter, all of those things to survive. So looking at pizza is a food, right? In my opinion, it's a pretty good food, but it's just a food. We all know that there may be healthier and cheaper options than pizza, but plot twist, what if you're a diabetic and your sugar is dropping? and all you have is that pizza, right? That cheesy pizza. That may be the only option for you to stay safe and healthy. So in that situation, it could be a need. So back to that answer, it just depends on your situation. It may be a want in some situations, or if it's going to affect your health and safety, it may be a need. So just something to think about. And then although everyone's needs and wants will differ depending on your situation, those few basic things as food, water, shelter, those are all things that need to be taken care of. They're a need. And then to help you think through what are your needs and wants, what they may look like. We can say that a need is something that if you went without it, it would jeopardize your health and your safety. And then a want is just simply that. It's a want. It's something that is tempting to us that may enhance the quality of our lives, but it's not necessarily needed, right? It's just going to enhance something. We need, like back to pizza, we need food, but it may not be that ready to go pizza. But if it's going to affect your health, then maybe yes. So we were just talking before the webinar that school may be starting this week for some people, or next week, or maybe later this week. But as we start our own academic years, there's going to be a lot of temptations to spend when you're in college. So if you're starting out, you may see some temptations that that you may not have had like during the summer or something like that. So before beginning school, you need to decide what items you will need and what items fall into that want category. So think through, what do I need to be successful? Maybe what are my wants? Try to differentiate those things. And then once you have those things established, you can make sure to stay on budget for the items that you need before making plans for the items that you want. Because we want things, and that's important, right? We're going to want maybe that specialty coffee, and we can try to plan for those things, but we need to make sure our needs are met before we focus on our wants. And then as you're going through your spending plan and you're identifying what you need and what you want and looking at what your expenses are, you may run into some different types of expenses. So on the screen, you see fixed, flexible, and occasional. Those are some expenses that you can categorize all of your expenses into. So a fixed expense is something that is constant and is usually associated with a contract. So your cell phone bill, you've probably signed a couple different pieces of paper that's essentially is going to say, I have this cell phone, I bought this cell phone, my cell phone costs $100 a month or whatever it may be, and you're agreeing to pay that on a monthly basis or whatever time period that is. And you sign that contract or something that says you're going to do that. And then another thing that could be associated with that is your rent, or if you're signing a lease, you're saying, I'm going to pay that monthly rent or whatever it may be. And then a flexible expense, kind of on the very flip side of that, is exactly how it sounds. So this type of expense fluctuates over time and it is not constant. It can kind of be all over the board. And this is a good place to think about if you want to cut spending. This may be the first place that you go to try to cut spending to be more within your budget. And then lastly, those occasional expenses. Those are the ones that kind of sneak up on you. They're irregular. They may happen on that irregular basis, whether it be bi-monthly, yearly, quarterly, things like that. They just sneak up on you. So now that we have that understanding of what type of expenses we may encounter, let's go ahead and go to the next slide, and we're gonna play a little bit of a game to help reinforce this. So on the screen, we see, I'm going to go through 3 questions, and let's talk about what type of expense rent or mortgage is. So is rent a flexible, fixed, or occasional expense? And then in the poll, you can go ahead and select that. And then on, and then we'll go through the answer. Yeah. And then for groceries, you can select if it's fixed, flexible, or occasional, and the same with pet care. And then we'll talk about the answers. It looks like for rent or mortgage, we're saying, the majority of us are saying fixed. Groceries, the majority of us are saying flexible. And then we got a tie for pet care, flexible and occasional.
And these polls were set up so you could answer multiple
Yeah.
options for each one. So it could be that pet care is both flexible and occasional.
Yeah. So with our renter mortgage, I kind of gave a teaser for that when I was explaining the different types of expenses. Um, your rent or mortgage payment, that's going to be that fixed expense, right? Because we signed something that said, hey, I'm going to pay $800 a month or whatever that payment is to live in this house or an apartment or wherever that may be. And then with groceries, that's something that is a little bit more flexible. You can try, there's a lot of factors that go into grocery shopping. That could be like if something's on sale that week and maybe you planned on buying flour and it was $4, but oh, it's on sale, so now it's $2. That's good for you, but that's going to change that expense as well. Or it could be like with inflation right now, everything's just higher than normal. So that might be something that maybe you didn't plan on. Like when you went to the grocery store last week, it's more expensive this week or so on. There's just a lot of factors that play into groceries. Therefore, we can see it as flexible. And then lastly, for pet care, we are saying that this is occasional. We're saying maybe this doesn't come up as often. I know as I was working through this slide, my dog actually went to the vet unexpectedly and I didn't plan on it. So that's an occasional expense for me. But I can see why people said flexible too, because maybe you have routine vet visits and that price may fluctuate. So I can see both sides of that. So thanks everybody for playing along. And I hope that reinforced what the fixed, flexible, and occasional expenses are. And then next we're going, sorry. And then next, we're going to talk about the cost of living. So on the screen, we have, so since we're U of I, we are in 3 different locations. So our Urbana-Champaign location, Chicago, and Springfield campuses. So depending on which campus you're planning on attending and what lifestyle choices you are making, living expenses can vary significantly from student to student. Even looking at our 3 locations, you can see how your basic living expenses vary. Like looking on the screen, it's more expensive to have a 1-bedroom apartment in Chicago than maybe it could be in Urbana-Champaign or even Springfield. So just things to consider. So when your lifestyle choices also dictate how much your living expenses will be, and it's important, particularly if you're borrowing money to pay for school, that you live like a student while you are a student, so you don't have to live like a student when you graduate. So let me say that again. So when you're a student, you may have to ball on a budget a little bit more, live like a student while you're a student, so that when you graduate, you don't have to live like a student. So ball on a budget a little bit more. That's my my favorite phrase. Or just making sure to tighten up your spending more as a student than when you graduate. Because when you're a student, maybe your goal is to, get the most education, get the best experience you can while you're getting that education. So maybe you need to tighten up some areas in your spending plan so you can make sure that you have the best educational experience that you have. So on the screen, we see all those expenses, and then utilities are another expense to consider and budget for. So things like your lights, water, electricity, parking, gas, trash fees, maintenance, all those things, and maybe even more that I'm not even thinking of, those can be bundled into your utility budget, or they can't. Maybe they're separate fees. Just looking to see when you're looking for apartments, when you're looking for housing, what's included and what isn't. And then remembering, so rent is often paid on that monthly basis. So that's that fixed expense. So budgeting for that. And then also to consider if you're living with somebody, if you're living on the Urbana-Champaign campus and rent is averaging at $750 a month, maybe you're not going to pay that whole $750 if you split that with a roommate. Just all those things to consider, those lifestyle choices, all those things to consider when you're looking at going out on your own, and things to consider. And we put in the chat where we got all these numbers from, and you can look at that as well. Even if you're considering moving somewhere out of state or somewhere other than these 3 places we have on the screen, you can look to see what the cost of living and approximately how much things will cost in the places you're deciding to live. And then so how are we going to achieve all these things? We want to go to school, we want to get our goals, we want to do all these things, but how are we going to achieve all that? So there is research behind the concept of visualizing your goals and writing them down that you'll be more successful in achieving those goals. So it's saying if we write down your goals, if you visualize your goals, you're more likely to achieve those goals. So I said on the Get Savvy team, we use the concept of the SMART goal method, and we've talked about this in webinars past, the SMART goal method, but we're going to dig into it a little bit more. So when you want to think through your SMART goal or goals, it's important to understand what your income is and what resources you have available to you. You want to identify what your priorities are when it comes to spending, so what's important to you. You want to understand what you value and how it relates to your spending. You want to think about if there's other people involved in those goals. Like I was just saying, if you're splitting rent with somebody, that person may be involved in your goals to help you achieve your financial goals. Or it could be if you're thinking about your goals and you want to include somebody, like if you want to go on a trip with your parent or spouse or somebody, that may be something where you want to include somebody else. And then also write down that SMART goal, make sure it's achievable. And then also make it a habit to check your SMART goal to see how you're doing. And then the last one is just life happens, and we all know that. So it's okay to reprioritize those goals when those unexpected life events happen. It happens, reprioritize, and we'll get back on track. And that's fine. And then there's a chart. Andrew's showing this chart on the screen. So we're saying that SMART goals, and we'll talk about this here in the next slide. We're saying that SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. But there are some other adjectives to help you think through what your SMART goal is on the screen that you can use, that you are absolutely free to use. So like I said, the specific, measurable, agreed upon, realistic, and timely. So specific just means making sure that your goal is specific, that it's easier to visualize, which makes it more likely to achieve. So when you're specific and not as broad, you're more likely to achieve it. And then measurable, making sure that you can quantify your goal in a way that allows you to track progress towards it. So there might be subtasks to complete or a specific number to save for, repay each month. So with finances, it's kind of easy for it to be measurable. So saying like, if you're going on that trip that I was just talking about, if you need to save $500 to go on that trip, you know what, how much you need to save for to reach that goal. And then agreed upon, this is the part that if you're going on a trip with your parent, friend, partner, whoever, making sure you include them in that goal, that everything's kosher and everything's good. Most people rely on others to help them accomplish their goal. So making sure everybody's good on the goal. Like, hey, I'm going to save $500, and this person, if the trip costs $1,000, I'm going to save 500. The other person's going to save 500. So making sure everybody's on the same page for that, and then making sure it's realistic. Think about what your current income, what resources you have, the time that you're allowing yourself to achieve this goal. Is that a realistic time frame to do that? Is it realistic to say, I can save $500 by spring break to go on that trip? Is that realistic? And then timely, giving yourself time to complete that goal by. So I'm saying spring break, maybe that's March. So from now to March, can I save $500 to go on that trip? Just making sure you give yourself time to do that and giving yourself a deadline to do so, and just helps you keep on track. And then in the chat, we've shared a blog to learn more about goal setting. And then I've also included a SMART goals worksheet where it can help you think through writing your own SMART goal. And you are free to use any of those, or you can go rogue and do it on your own. That's fine. And then also I want to point out that it can be difficult to set goals, right? There's a lot of general and personal reasons it can be difficult to set or maintain your goals. So inflation being one of them, I kind of talked about that. Inflation has a high cost in goods and services, which can directly affect us, the consumer, right? So while the US annual inflation has slowed down a little bit, it can also be hard to adjust when trying to stay on track for goals. So like the example of maybe you went to the grocery store when you went to the grocery store last year, things may be different or a little bit more expensive than they were last year to this year. So trying to account for that in your budget. Another thing could be student loans. So with the student loan pause, payment pause ending and payments resuming, that may be something that you have to add back into your budget that maybe you took out, or something that you have to put back in brand new because you have to start paying on those loans. And then financial avoidance. So I think we can all agree that money is one of the top stressors for adults. There's research behind that to say that money is a big stressor for people. Um, Financial avoidance can come into play with that. So financial avoidance is when we ignore our own financial situations for various reasons. We could be avoiding due to anxiety, avoidance, or not knowing enough about a situation. But that could just potentially hinder or make it difficult to set a goal. And all of these things are just to say is that and to acknowledge that these are real reasons as to why it's difficult to set or maintain financial goals. That's why when creating your spending plan, when doing your SMART goals and all of those things, it's good to just readjust, evaluate, and check in with yourself, but acknowledging that there are some things that can hinder our goals as well. And then financing your degree is about more than just covering that tuition, right? Whenever we think about going to school, we may just automatically think about tuition and fees, but it's just more than that. So things like buying your books, buying extra supplies, your rent, your housing, and your utilities that are associated with your housing, traveling, and your living expenses can all add into the cost of your degree. So let's talk about how to pay for and even minimize some of those costs. So the main educational expenses you may need to account for is your tuition and fees. Like I said, your tuition and fees depend on a number of different factors, such as if you're full-time, part-time, if you're an international student, if you're out of state, if you're undergraduate or a graduate, the list goes on and on. There's a lot of things that go into it. So one way to plan for those types of expenses is just to make sure to visit your campus registrar's office to view a tuition and fee schedule for your campus and program. So the registrar's office can assist you in finding out how much your tuition and fees will be before they are charged to your student account. So keyword before, so you'll know beforehand. And then we just put in the chat box all UIC, UIUC, and UIS's tuition and fee schedule. So if those are any of your campuses and you haven't looked at it yet, maybe you want to, and you can kind of see what's going on. And then the other expenses that we have on the screen, those can be associated with your education. So like your living expenses, your textbooks, materials for lab classes, or purchasing case studies, all of those things, those can be added into your education expenses and things that you can kind of think through and plan for. And another thing that I thought was interesting is, so you're going to school, you want to get the most education, the best experience you can. Maybe you want to join a social or professional association to enhance your education to get the best experience out of it you can. If you know you want to do that, maybe try to do a little research to see what membership dues or fees they have, and just planning those things out can just help you with your future expenses, your spending plan, all of those things. And so now in the chat, I want to ask everybody, were there any expenses that surprised you when you moved out on your own? So as you're moving out, like I said, if you're starting school this week, next week, or in a couple of weeks, was there anything that surprised you when you moved out on your own? Oh, and it looks like one of our links does not work for the tuition and fees schedule.
Suhas, can you find the non-broken week link? But we also, the Student Money Management Center also reports through the Bursar office. So as of now, I think all of Urbana's charges have been applied to your account. So you can log into UiPay and look at what the charges actually are. for what you're enrolled in, but any registration changes that you make during the next couple weeks will also impact how much you owe. So being familiar with the registrar office and their role in applying charges to your student account can help you understand like what the potential costs are associated with changing your course load or taking a different lab, or those kinds of things might be helpful as well. But we also had this chat question that we were talking about before I got a little distracted about any expenses that might have surprised you when you moved out on your own. If you already have lived on your own, I know this is targeted towards new incoming students that might not have lived on your own, but surprise expenses do pop up. And if we can have a little discussion about that in the chat, that would help provide some perspective to incoming students. I think people might be shy today, but in the interest of time, since we have so much to cover, we'll go over some things that have surprised other students in the past. So some unexpected costs for some other students have included healthcare and insurance, for instance, especially international students that might be from countries where that is already provided, or they weren't aware of copay requirements in their home countries. Phone bills can be very expensive. You got to do a lot of comparison shopping to find lower cost services for cell phone. Reception of wire transfers can be costly, especially for, again, international students, which make up about 25% of University of Illinois system's student population. Taxes are also sometimes a little unexpected for students. For students that are unfamiliar with sales tax, where you go shopping at a grocery store or you go get some hygiene supplies, what's listed on the price tag at those locations for things like shampoo is not what you will pay when you go up to the register. There's an additional sales tax fee. Additionally, income taxes, which you have to file every year, can be very confusing for everyone, regardless of if you are a domestic student or international student. Tips can also be confusing depending on the context of when you're expected to tip. There's a culture in the United States, for instance, that you tip when you dine in a restaurant, or if you get a specialty coffee from a barista, there's an expectation of tipping. There's also other situations where you might be expected to tip. Utilities like water is also sometimes surprising for some students that might not have never paid for utilities before. And then the cost of internet, which can vary nationally in cost as well. And if you have free broadband access or whatever in your home country, that might be a little bit of a surprise. Someone did mention in the chat the price of stocking an apartment with basic amenities like sheets, kitchen items, etc. It's definitely harder to anticipate after living at home for several years. I agree. The upfront costs of moving out on your own for the first time, especially if you don't have a family that thought about that and was like, here's all my old stuff you can have. I got a lot of hand-me-downs when I moved away from home. So I was covered with a lot of that. But not everybody has those conversations or people to think about letting someone know when they move out on their own that that's going to be a cost. So moving right along, we're going to be talking a little bit about the process of financing college. For example, you are going to want to prepare by researching. We gave you some tools to use, the registrar office. You want to understand what your resources are. Many people have multiple funding sources for paying for their college degrees. So understanding what those resources are. If you have not already applied for the free application for federal student aid and you are eligible, you want to apply for that as soon as possible. And you have to apply every year that you intend to go to college the following academic year. So that application will be available October 1st for next academic year. So you want to make sure to apply as soon as possible once it's available so you get access to first come, first serve aid that you might be eligible for. Once you have completed those applications, for certain types of third-party scholarships, you might have to apply on a rotating basis. It might not just be October, right? You might have to look for those scholarships and apply throughout the year. Once you receive the aid that you have become eligible for, your school will let you know how much you qualify for through the financial aid notification. We also sometimes call it a financial aid award letter that gives you a summary of what's available for grants and loans and scholarships as well. And then once you have either dropped out of school or completed your degree, if you've borrowed any loans, you'll have to repay. So there's some tools that we can put in the chat that we'll be discussing to help you think about repayment, especially as student loans, federal student loans, are entering repayment in October of this year for anyone that's not enrolled full-time in school. So there are two types of financial aid that you might see on your financial aid notifications. There are gift aid and self-help aid. So examples of gift aid would include things like grants, scholarships, waivers, things that do not have to be repaid after they have been provided to you. Self-help aid includes loans, which do have to be repaid, or student employment called federal work study. So in the federal work study situation, you work for the funds that are available on your financial aid notification. So a couple reminders about financial aid notifications. The cost of attendance that's listed on those notifications is estimated, and they go do a calculation based on your enrollment, based on whether or not you're living on campus or off campus, but they estimate what your cost of attendance is going to be. Your cost of attendance could be a lot more than what is estimated, or a lot less than what is estimated, based on your lifestyle choices and your enrollment. So the amount of classes that you're taking can affect your cost of attendance, your housing selection. So if you choose to live with a roommate, even if you're in the dorm versus in an apartment, that can affect your housing costs, right? A single is always going to be more expensive than a double when it comes to dorm housing. Your other lifestyle choices, how you choose to eat, what if you eat out a lot, or if you have a certain way that you choose your meal plan. For instance, meal plans differ across all of the University of Illinois system universities, so it will differ depending on where you're going as well. And all of those impact your total cost of attendance. All right, so we are going to put another poll up here. I know you're getting really fond of the polls now, so we'll launch that. We spoke a little bit about federal work study already, and I want to know, do you think there are limits to how many hours you can work for federal work study funds if you get an eligible position? All right, we've got about 55% of people that have participated so far. Moving right along, 88%. All right, so we'll end the poll and share the results. Most of you identified yes, and some of you were unsure, which I appreciate. So we'll stop sharing that. So federal work study, there are limits. So to be eligible for federal work study, there are certain income qualifications that are identified by what you complete on the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA. Your financial aid office process for federal work study eligibility could also vary by institution. For example, our UIC students have to request the federal work study on their award letter or on their FAFSA. This can change. So I would contact your financial aid office if you think that you should be eligible for federal work study and it's not on your financial aid notification. See what you need to do to get it on your financial aid notification. Most positions are going to be on campus or associated with the university that you are attending. You can only work a maximum of 20 hours per week. The schedule that you work is going to be flexible with your class schedule. And it is your responsibility to find a job. They don't just put the federal work study position on your financial aid notification and then offer you a job. You actually have to search for it. So since we are part of University of Illinois system, we will put in the chat the virtual job boards or student office websites for each one of the universities, Urbana, Chicago, and Springfield, for you to be able to search for federal work study and other on-campus employment opportunities. All right, so there's also a tool from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB, called Your Financial Path to Graduation, and it is designed to help students and their families understand the offers provided by financial aid offices. So we call them financial aid notifications. You can also get help planning for remaining costs after you've identified the gap between what's available on your financial aid notification and what you're going to be charged based on your enrollment. It will also help you estimate how much you'll owe and if you can afford any debt that you take on in order to graduate from your program. And it will help you compare offers from different schools and decide what to do after you've reviewed kind of your financial plan for graduation. And I'm going to hand it over to Nikki to talk about choosing a financial institution.
Hello. All right. So we're going to talk, choosing a financial institution can be overwhelming because there are so many choices. We're going to give you an overview of some things to consider. So first in the chat, why might you need a financial institution, either a bank or a credit union, in the United States? You guys can go ahead and put an answer there. I know people are being a little shy today, so won't wait too long. All right, so some examples could be because you want a safe place to put your money. You could use a debit card, a credit card. You could invest. You can take out a loan. There are a lot of different ways why you might need a financial institution. Andrea. So we're going to talk a little bit about banks versus credit unions. Both are available, and it's really kind of your personal choice about what you would like to do. So they are similar in the ways that they are both financial institutions and they keep your money safe. They both provide financial services. They may differ on what exactly those financial services are, but they're provided, and both have strengths and weaknesses. So again, it's a personal choice. So one of the biggest difference is that banks are a for-profit company, whereas credit unions are member owned and they are nonprofit. So that is one big difference. Banks sometimes have more physical locations or like ATMs than credit unions. Banks traditionally have been quicker with developing and implementing the new technology. And real banks, because there are some banks that are out there, are insured by the FDIC. Whereas credit unions, it's the National Credit Union Association, NCUA. Credit unions often have a higher interest on deposits, so your money makes more, and a lower interest on loans. So again, they're both are credible financial institutions. It's really just what your personal preference becomes. So the first thing you have to start thinking about is what's important to you when it comes to your money. There's so many different aspects. Do you use a lot of cash and you want ATMs available without near you so you don't have to pay ATM fees? Or do you physically have to go into the bank a lot? Whether, or maybe not a lot, just you have to go into a bank for certain things. All right. So then you're going to think, is it located conveniently for you? There's also some banking institutions that are completely online. Is that what you want? Other things like interest rates on savings accounts, any costs of services that you may have to have, fees, right? Comparing fees between financial institutions, any sort of minimum balance requirements. And a big one, lending services. Not everybody does lending services. So if you know down the line, you may need to take out a loan for something. Not student loans, but any other type of loan, that may be something that you want to think about. Also, likewise, if you want to do investing at your bank, have your bank handle that. Like I know, for example, Chase, you could have an entire just investing 401k arm if you choose. So the first thing to choosing is to figure out what is most important to you. So a few things when you go to open up a bank account, as we discussed, you have to decide on services or products that you want. I'm not going to go through those again since we just talked about it for the time being, but the other thing that I forgot to mention is an app. Like if an app is very important to you for your banking, you are going to want to check to make sure that your financial institution has that. Then you're going to compare financial institutions and select the ones that have the services and products that you want. And if you can't find one that matches everything you want, which one matches the closest to what you want? And we're going to talk a little bit about what you actually need for a bank account to open it. But just remember, this is very general because institutions may have their own particular requirements. But in general, in order to open a bank account, you're going to need your social security number or your individual tax ID number. You're going to need some sort of evidence of physical and mailing addresses. Some you just may need one piece of mail. You may need two things of evidence for some institutions. It just depends. You're also going to need some sort of government issued ID. So whether that's driver's license, passport, anything like that. And you will also have to have an initial deposit when you open the bank account. All right, so we're going to do some myths or facts now on credit.
Thank you, Nikki. So we're going to talk about credit myths and facts. So I'm going to launch another poll. Because again, we love those polls. All right, so credit myth or fact number one, credit scores and credit reports are the same. You can go ahead and answer in the poll that we just launched. We also launched another credit myth or fact in that same poll. Credit cards have more legal protections than debit cards. All right, we have about 55% of people that participated, but since we are running a little behind, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results. So for the first credit myth, we talked about credit scores and credit reports are the same. 83% of you said that it was a myth and 17% said it was a fact. So in fact, it is a myth. Credit scores and credit reports are different things. So credit reports have all the data related to your credit worthiness. It has information that lenders or other businesses might need to review about your credit worthiness or information about you. Whereas credit scores is a number associated with your credit worthiness that businesses can use to decide whether or not they want to do business with you. Not all businesses use scores. Some use just scores, some use credit reports instead, some use a combination of looking at your credit scores and what is in your report. So it's important that you have made sure that whatever information is in your report is accurate. So no matter what credit score is being pulled, it's an accurate representation of your credit worthiness. And on our credit myth or fact number two, credit cards have more legal protections than debit cards. 17% of you said it was a myth, and 83% said it was a fact. This is a fact. So credit cards have more legal protection than debit cards, because, for instance, if you have some fraudulent charges on your credit card and you kind of delay telling your credit card company about it, you are only legally liable for up to $50 worth of those fraudulent charges. Whereas with debit cards, you could be legally liable for everything in your account that's taken out, plus any additional charges. Legally, every financial institution is going to have different policies on what protections that they provide you, but legally you have more protections with credit card than with a debit card. So if you're making a lot of online purchases, credit cards are going to give you more protection than debit cards. All right, so I'm going to launch another credit myth or fact poll. I guess first I need to stop sharing this one. All right, and then we're going to launch this next one. So we have credit myth 3 and 4. So credit myth 3 is carrying a balance is good for your credit scores. Is that a myth or a fact? And the next one is lenders won't approve you for a loan you cannot afford. All right, in the interest of time, I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So carrying a balance is good for your credit scores. This is a myth. So carrying a balance doesn't really help your credit scores. It actually can hurt your credit scores depending on when your credit scores are pulled. So for example, let's say that you always pay your credit card off every month. That's not going to impact your credit scores at all, other than having on-time payment history as long as it's paid on time. If you choose to carry a balance over where you don't pay the entire amount off, then you will be charged interest, and it can increase the credit utilization ratio that a lender sees when they go to pull your credit report. However, even if you pay your credit card balance off every month, depending on how much of your available credit that you are using when a credit score is pulled, that will determine your credit utilization ratio. So for example, I typically pay my balance off every month. So I have a long history of on-time credit history, which helps my credit scores whenever they are pulled. But I have to make a conscious effort to pay my balance off completely before I seek out new credit, so I can lower my utilization ratio whenever that credit score is pulled. If you want to learn more about credit, we will also be putting more information in the chat. Thank you, Suhas, so you can learn more. For the next credit myth or fact, lenders won't approve you for a loan you can't afford. 33% said myth and 67% said a fact. This is a myth. Lenders are in the market to provide you a loan, and there are certain things that they will consider to determine their risks when deciding whether or not to give a loan to you. However, they do not consider all of your potential financial costs or responsibilities. They'll look at what your outstanding debt is, and that might be a consideration. But let's say you maintain a certain lifestyle, they're not going to look at what your expenses are on a daily basis or a weekly basis. They're not going to look at how much you spend on coffee or how often you like to go on vacation. Anything that's related to your lifestyle is not going to be part of their calculation. So affording something is rather objective, and so you need to decide what you can afford. Don't let it be dictated by whatever a lender says you're approved for. So a lot of people can get in trouble by assuming that a lender won't approve you for a loan you can't afford, which is a myth. All right, so we are stopping sharing that poll. And then we have one more credit myth or fact. You only have 3 credit scores, one for each credit bureau. Is that a myth or a fact? All right, I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So 75% of you said it was a myth and 25% said it was a fact. this is a myth. You have multiple credit scores. So each bureau sells their own credit scores. They have different flavors of those credit scores. FICO is a credit scoring company. They are not a bureau. And they use information that they purchase from the credit bureaus to create scores. There are 50 different FICO scores. Currently, I think we're on like FICO score 9 or something. We might already be in 10. But you could have 50 different FICO scores pulled from the same company, depending on what the lender's priorities are when they pull your score. So it's most important to make sure that the information in your credit reports are accurate, because that's what the credit bureaus provide. And then that will make sure that whatever score is pulled is an accurate representation of your creditworthiness. All right, so just a brief summary of U.S. credit system. Please, if you have to go, feel free to drop off. We are recording this, and I know we're running a little behind, but I do want to give anyone that is interested in credit a little bit of a primer on that before you jump into more advanced credit topics. So there are 3 main credit bureaus in the United States: Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, which you might have guessed that there are 3 from that last myth question that I asked. Credit can also impact your access to financial tools, housing, like leases, jobs, for instance, especially outside of Illinois, and other things as well. So as well as the amount of that you pay for certain financial services like loans. Credit scores are ratings that are associated with your credit worthiness based on the data contained in your credit reports. I've mentioned that a couple times because it's important. You can also get a copy of your credit reports from each of the credit bureaus at least once per year at annualcreditreport.com. Currently, through December of 2023, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax are providing free weekly report access. So you can still get it weekly through the end of this calendar year if that's something that's important to you. They made that policy available unilaterally at the beginning of the pandemic to help people to identify identity theft issues. So that's a valuable tool to identify if you are a victim of identity theft. And you can learn a lot more about credit through a lot of the tools that we have available in the chat. So thanks to Haas for mentioning those. All right. One thing that we talked about was having a plan, right, for your personal finances. This is also helpful for managing financial stress. So having a plan, that's kind of why you're here, right? To create a plan. It's easier to adapt a plan if you already have one identified. You also want to track what your behaviors are. Your spending behaviors will change based on many different factors. So tracking them helps you kind of identify where there's this variance if you get into kind of a tough financial spot. It's also important, as was mentioned by Emily earlier, to know what your priorities are and reprioritize things if you need to, so that if you find that one of your behaviors doesn't align with your values, you can make adjustments slowly rather than all at once. It's a lot more stressful to try to change a whole lot of behaviors at one time rather than just one behavior at a time, slowly. It's also important, as Emily again mentioned, to understand what your resources are. Being in college gives you access to a lot of resources, but you also want to investigate what's in the community that you live in to see what resources already exist that you can kind of leverage to meet your needs or accomplish your goals. And you want to make sure you're not avoiding issues. We talked a little bit about financial avoidance earlier. So if the source of your financial stress is something like a debt collection agency calling you, don't avoid it. It does not go away on its own. There are a lot of resources that can help you both on campus and in communities. So reaching out for help is the best way to not avoid issues. It's also important to be flexible. Transitions to college are very difficult regardless of your age or stage in life. So it's important to be flexible with your plan since there's not a lot, or since there's a lot that is outside of your control. And it's also important to learn and practice coping skills. As with all parts of dealing with stress, it's important to learn and practice healthy behaviors. All right, so for protecting your finances, some things that you'll want to do is continue learning about information security. There's a lot of technology advancements that makes it more difficult to kind of think about how to protect your finances or make it a habit because things are kind of changing. But that just means the habit needs to be continue learning about information security and IT. You want to update your apps, your mobile apps and your operating systems on any of your devices regularly as soon as those updates are available. You want to avoid sharing PINs, passwords, IDs, cards, credit cards, debit cards. You might want to consider using a password manager as well. And you want to avoid saving your social security number or card details like your debit card or credit card in an unsecure fashion. For example, don't put it in a notes app unless that notes app can be encrypted and password protected. Don't save it in your photo reel either, especially for things that are auto uploaded to cloud. If it's not encrypted and password protected, it can be easily hacked by bad actors. So just keep those things in mind. And then when you're thinking about financial transitions, which going to college is a financial transition, you want to set or evaluate your goals early, analyze potential changes in your behaviors. There's going to probably be a lot of that. You want to create a plan for priorities and new spending. You also want to track your expenses and make changes to the plan as necessary. We talked about being flexible. This is where that's really important. And you want to regularly discuss your progress and new spending habits with anyone that it might impact. It could be roommates, it could be parents, it could be spouse or a significant other. Those are all important aspects of planning for financial transitions and coping with them. All right, so kind of summarize what we've talked about today. You want to create a plan for your college costs and any contingencies that might come up, which is, again, hard to plan for, so give yourself some grace. You want to diversify funding sources to reduce your risk, so make sure that you're applying for FAFSA, look for opportunities to work while on campus, look for scholarship opportunities as well. There are a lot of offices across all of the campuses that help you with applying for scholarships. You want to choose a financial institution and services that meet your needs. If a financial institution is currently not meeting your needs, it's okay to switch. You don't have to have any loyalty to a financial institution just because you already have a relationship with them. It is kind of tedious to change relationships with financial institutions, but again, if they're not meeting your needs, you can switch. You want to continue to learn about credit, as it is very complicated and seems to change constantly, as well as other types of financial technology that can produce security risks to your identity as well as your finances. And then you want to learn and practice ways of coping with stress, either financial or other types of stress that can end up having financial repercussions. So that's kind of a summary. We also are going to be talking in a couple weeks on renting and leasing. So you can sign up for that if you haven't already. It will be on September 6th at noon again. You can also watch some of our previous webinars on YouTube at go.uillinois.edu/getsavvy. And you can stay in contact with us. So there are many organizations across the state that are working together on this series, and I want to thank them. And we'll stay on for questions as well. So again, if anyone needs to leave, that's completely okay. We ran a little bit over today, but please let us know in the chat if you have any questions, and feel free to reach out to the Student Money Management Center at ilstudentmoney@uillinois.edu if you do have any questions that pop up later. So I think there was one question about federal work study that I'm going to elaborate on a little bit. So one of the questions was, would most undergrad lab jobs qualify as federal work study? So lab jobs are often funded by grants, and some of those grants are research grants that might have certain qualifications. And the federal work study funds are going to have limits as well based on your income as identified by the FAFSA. So there's a lot of layers to this. So it's important that you are asking if a job is federal work study eligible position, because there are some jobs that might not qualify even though they're on campus. And so having that conversation, making sure that you're looking for that as a listing in the job description, because you do have to apply and interview and be offered the job and accept the job as federal work study before it can be applied. So that there's a lot more to that question that I felt needed to be identified. The other thing is the amount of funds that are listed on your financial aid award letter or notification for federal work study will be the limit of what you can earn through that job. However, most positions on campus, at least at our institutions, are not going to say, okay, well, you ran out of federal work study funds, but we don't have any more money to pay you through institutional funds, so you can't work anymore. But that does happen at some institutions. So it's important to know what the limitations are based on what's available in your financial aid award letter. Some institutions also will provide federal work study funds in your financial aid notification. And if you do not find a job in that first semester that allows you to take advantage of those federal work study funds, they won't offer it again. But again, every financial aid office is going to have different procedures regarding federal work study. So it's important to know what's going to happen on your campus. Whew, hopefully that answered a few questions. All right. It doesn't look like we have any other questions. Suhas or Nikki, did you see any other questions that I might have missed?
I do not think so.
All right, fabulous. Again, if you have any questions, you can email ilstudentmoney@uillinois.edu. We can try to get you some answers. We'll be making this recording available in the next week or so and sending out to all registrants. But I want to say thank you again for joining us and have a delightful rest of your day and good luck starting classes.